Hi, I'm James Brown, and welcome to another installment of A Conversation with CBS Sports. Today's guest is the Executive Director of the NBA Players Association, Mr. Billy Hunter. We all know you as head of the NBA Players Association, but your background is much more varied than that. Why? Why do you think?
Just a drive to succeed, and I knew, one, that I had to get an education, and every time I was given an opportunity, I took advantage of it. So if it meant along the way that I met people that exposed me to something new that I thought would be beneficial to me as a person, to help develop me and to enhance me, then I would engage in it.
You know what, now, again, because those who may know you only from what you do currently don't know of the athletic background that you had. Although you're representing the NBA players, you were actually quite the football player. What was your background as a player, and how did law school figure into the equation?
Well, when I was at Syracuse, I realized that there was something that I wanted to be, and it was because of some of the friendships that I developed on campus that I wanted to ultimately go to law school.
With some pretty iconic names as well, too, in terms of having played sports at Syracuse.
Yeah, I was there. Fortunately, my time overlapped. I was there doing what I consider to be the golden era of football at Syracuse. The likes of, I came on the heels of Jim Brown, having graduated, Art Baker. I was there with Ernie Davis, John Mackey, and I were roommates for 2 of the 4 years that I was there. John Brown was there. And then Floyd Little was 2 years behind me. But Jim Nance, myself, Nat Duckett, it was just a great time. It was a great time to be at Syracuse and a great time to be part of the football team. And then I actually served as captain of the team in my junior and senior year. And then I went on. I got hurt in my senior year. In the third game of my senior year, I broke my ankle playing against Kansas.
And the positions that you played?
I was playing running back. I played running back and defensive back.
So you're used to hard knocks.
Yeah, and so then I got replaced by Floyd. Floyd replaced me. And that was the beginning of Floyd's career. Floyd Little, he went on to become one of the greatest players ever. I was approached by both the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Redskins. I thought I was going to be drafted early on. Matter of fact, I had a couple of meetings early in the season with Al Davis and the Raiders about literally getting drafted. And then I got hurt and sat out the next 7 games. I then got an offer, and I went with the Redskins instead of the Eagles because the Redskins offered me $1,000 more as a free agent. I got something like $4,500 sign-in bonus. And,
big money, huh?
And yeah, that's right. And I made the team, and I was there like 2 years playing. And then I got hurt in the second year. I developed a calcium deposit in my thigh and couldn't get rid of it, couldn't shake it. Near the end of the training camp, I got traded. John Mackey had convinced Don Shula and them to bring me to Baltimore. So I went over to Baltimore with the Colts. And when I got there, they didn't realize the scope of my injury. And I couldn't run because my hamstring had actually calcified. So Shula told me at the last cut, he said, unfortunately, we got to let you go because you're injured and we don't know when you're going to heal, et cetera. And you probably need a year layoff. I then, decided, okay, well, I'll go back to school. And while in the process of going back to Howard Law School, I then got a call from the Miami Dolphins. And at that time, Bob Pellegrini was one of my teammates on the Redskins. And he had been hired by George Wilson, who had been the former head coach of the Detroit Lions and who then became an assistant coach under Bill McPeak with the Redskins. And he was now the first coach at the Miami Dolphins. So I was playing with the Dolphins, and we had like about 3 games left in the season. And I was up playing against the Buffalo Bills. You can see my fingers are stitched up. And it was in about 5-degree temperature, snow lined up around the field. And I was catching punts. And all of a sudden, bam, the ball hit. And I broke all 3 fingers. And in one of the fingers, the bone actually came through. So they took me in the locker room and stitched up my fingers, taped them up, and they said, okay, you're good for the second half. So I came out, and I played the second half.
Wait a minute, you had a bone sticking out of one of them?
Yeah, right here, this one here.
And you're good for the second half?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, and they just stitched up in the locker room and put it back in place and said, okay, you're ready to go. So I came out, and when we got back to Miami about a week later, Joe Thomas, at that time was the GM, and he said, what we're going to do is we're going to put you in injury reserve. And I was making like about $18,000 a year playing with the with the Dolphins, and he says we're only going to pay you $300. And I said, no, 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 that ain't gonna work. You ain't gonna pay me $300. I want you to pay me all my money. And I had sat down with the likes of Cookie Gilchrist and Earl Faze. I know they telling me, man, brother, stand up and don't go for this, and you know you got to make these people pay you, etc. So Thomas said, no, I'm gonna pay you $300. And so I said, well, you're not gonna pay me $300 because I'm not gonna be here. And so I ended up leaving, and I had already completed like a year in law school. And so I then went back to Washington and enrolled back in Howard Law School. I had actually started law school my first year with the Redskins. We would normally practice from about 10 in the morning until about 2 or 3 in the afternoon back in those days in the 60s. So I would get up and I would take an 8 o'clock class. And then I would then go out to practice. And then I would come back in the afternoon and then see if I could catch a class if it was something I could do. And so I had managed to put together, you know, a series of hours and credits over that first year and a half or so where I was going to law school at Howard.
So I got to believe that combining sports, your background, the interest in that, and law has to be the best of both worlds.
Well, it is in a sense that it gives you an opportunity to stay engaged in something that you like. When you're looking at specialties in law, clearly today sports is one of the sexiest. It's one of the growingest industries. So it's great to be around it, but also because it provides me an opportunity to kind of mentor the players. So I don't spend as much time. We spend time. I got guys like Yared and others who spend time talking to the players about law, and if I have to, then I'll sit down and explain it to them. But it gives me a chance to basically interact with them and to try to instill within some of those virtues and things that you and I talk about. Because it's important that while they're here, that they make the most of the opportunity, and also to try to make them understand the power and the influence that they have. I think most athletes really aren't aware of the leverage and the importance that they have and the impact that they have on people, particularly if they're trying to get people to do things positive. And so I try to spend a lot of time with as many players as I can, mentoring them, making them understand what their obligations are, not only just themselves, but the community. You know, because you and I, at least I did, I'm much older than you, I grew up in an era where you had to be, quote, race conscious. So you were always, you had to be a race man in the sense that you had to understand that if you did anything negatively, it didn't just reflect poorly upon you, but it reflected poorly upon the race. For some reason, we may have gotten away from that a little bit, but that's sort of, I'm from the old school, so that's sort of what I kind of abide by.
So obviously, those people who did follow, who are major lovers of the game, fans of the game, were you ever concerned that the deal wasn't going to get done?
Well, you're always concerned. There's no question about it. But I knew, I guess, based upon past experience, that would have to happen. There's no way that either side was going to suffer the loss of a season. There's somewhere or another we would get there, and we ultimately did.
In terms of your face-to-face tough negotiations with the very well-known and marquee face of David Stern, did it ever get to be very personal?
Well, David and I have been around, I've been around 16 years, and we have developed a relationship over those 16 years. I respect David, and I'm convinced that he respects me, and I think we admire one another. Early on in my tenure, it got ugly back in 1998, but I said to David, I think this time out, he and I both, I said that there's been a lot of water over the bridge in that I'm much older, much more in control of myself than maybe before. I was much more youthful before. David similarly, and so we're like two old lions in the room, and so there's kind of an understanding that we have with one another that we can disagree without being disagreeable. That doesn't mean that the hackles don't get raised from time to time, because they do. We don't hesitate I don't hesitate to raise my voice and sometimes use some expletives, and he's done the same, and that's just the nature of business. But then we know when it's all over, at the end of the day, we have to get back in order to make sure that this business continues to thrive and be vital.
If there's anything that you want to leave as your imprint on the NBA Players Association, what would that be, or what would they be?
Well, I don't know. I really haven't given much thought to that. I kind of figure that, you know, my work and record will stand for itself, and I'll let people in the future judge, you know, what kind of contribution I made or didn't make.
But at least currently, you're saying in terms of your mentoring desire,
Oh yeah, there's
that
no
obviously
question
is
about it.
rooted
Yes.
in something, and that's rooted in your desire to do what?
Rooted in my desire to kind of uplift black males. I think it's extremely important, you know, players in general, but obviously I have an affinity to my own people. And so I just think it's important to try to enlighten and educate and expose black professional athletes as much as possible.
You see it taking root?
Oh, I
Any
do.
signs of progress?
It's taking root in quite a few players, yes.
In what fashion? Give me a palpable, give me a tangible
Well,
example.
I think some of the guys are much more sensitive. They're much more charitable, and they understand the obligation they have. One, to be law-abiding, and to do those things that are going to be considered a benefit to the community at large, i.e., to America.